Will we see significant change in the Montreal Canadiens organization next season? We certainly have a lot to look forward to this offseason, and we're looking at today in an article from the Montreal Gazette going over a number of players who may not be a part of things next year. We're looking at Carey Price, Shea, Brendan Gallagher, Jonathan Drouin, maybe others as well. We'll discuss all the possible scenarios and discuss in our article. Plus, we have lots of other updates, including the latest on the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. We're down to one spot that needs to be clinched, and that could happen tonight. Plus, we have some other injury updates and other news as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we have a lot to talk about. First, let's start with some injury updates. Unfortunately, last night, the Nashville Predators might have lost their starting goaltender, UC Saros, for some time. It's hard to say the exact severity of his injury, but late in the third period in the game against the Calgary Flames, he did have to leave. I think there was, it was late, 6 minutes or so left in the period, and he left with an apparent leg or ankle injury. The team has not really said a whole lot. Even NHL insiders and reporters have been trying to see if they can get more of an update. There hasn't been much of anything said. The kind of prediction, I guess you could say, based on what they do know, is it does look like Saros will have to miss the remaining couple of games left for the Nashville Predators in the regular season, but that's not too big a deal because as of last night, they were able to clinch their playoff spot, so they don't have to worry about missing the playoffs. And really, to be honest, I think if they come in as wildcard 1 or wildcard 2, they either play Colorado or Calgary. Both would be a significant challenge, a really strong team. I don't really think it matters that much, and if they got to do what they got to do here to give themselves the best shot to try to be able to steal a few games and have any chance to win that series, which no matter what team they end up playing. So this is certainly going to be a lot of pressure on David Rittich, of course, known as Big Save Dave. If they end up playing the Calgary Flames in the playoffs, which is quite a possibility, like we saw last night, then he could end up being the starter against his former club that he played at for some time. Now, Rittich only has one playoff game to his name, and I don't even think he played the entire game. I believe he came in as relief, so certainly not a great deal of experience in that regard. I think he only has like one period under his belt, and he gave up, I believe it was 3 goals or something to that effect. I don't have it right in front of me, but I know it wasn't good. Of course, that doesn't mean things couldn't be better this time around. Of course, the team in front of him has been playing relatively well, but I guess we will see. A Predators team without UC Saros is just not the same team, in my opinion. Now, the Avalanche got some good news. They got word that Mikko Rantanen will be back, so he'll play in their next game tomorrow. And they do expect to have Captain Gabriel Landeskog back for Game 1 of the playoffs. I mean, Jared Bednar was talking about this and didn't really say for certain. I think it's a little bit premature to say that because we don't know, exactly where things stand, but they're quite optimistic at this point that he will be available for Game 1. Now, of course, we saw a lot of hockey last night. It was probably the most entertaining night of the regular season last night. We saw Austin Matthews in Toronto score goal number 60 on the season, so that's quite a milestone for him. First Maple Leaf to hit 60, first American-born player to hit 60, so quite accomplishment in that regard, and the first NHL player to hit 60 in quite some time. I mean, we've only seen Alex Ovechkin and Steven Stamkos hit that milestone in the past couple of decades, so he's certainly in very elite company. Say what you want. I know the Leafs obviously have a huge fan base, and a lot of the other fan bases tend to throw a lot of hate their way. And I get all that, and that's fine. But no matter what you think, you have to respect his ability to score goals, and Matthews will be a big part of any success they may have here in these playoffs coming up. But there was certainly lots of other action last night as well. The big game of the night, though, was the Dallas Stars against the Vegas Golden Knights. If the Dallas Stars were able to win in regulation time, then the Golden Knights would have been eliminated. Dallas would have clinched, and all of the playoff spots would have been spoken for. Unfortunately, Dallas could not get the job done in regulation. They did pull out a shootout victory, though, and obviously that crushed the Golden Knights in the shootout, went into extra shooters. I believe it was round 7 or 8 by the time Miro Heiskanen finally scored the go-ahead goal for the victory. And then, of course, William Karlsson had a chance to come off the bench and tie the game and was not able to do so. So Jake Ottinger out-battled Logan Thompson, but both goalies did phenomenal in the shootout. All those rounds, all those shots, and only one goal against. So certainly Vegas has been coming up short here as of late. That's their second consecutive shootout loss. And we haven't really seen a lot of production out of some of their top players. And if they do miss the playoffs, and it's certainly looking like they will at this point, you have to wonder what changes are going to come. As I mentioned before in the last few days, talking about the Robin Lehner situation. How are they going to deal with that? Will they decide to replace the coach? What else is going to happen? They've spent a ton of money here trying to build a super team, and as they continue to add pieces this year, things have backfired. I know there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances going against them, but many other teams face the same thing. You could say the same thing about teams like the Islanders and Ottawa, who battled a lot of COVID early on. A lot of other teams had injuries as well. So at the end of the day, there's not a ton of excuses. They just have not executed to their full capability this year, and they faced a lot of adversity. And I know this franchise is facing its first major adversity for the first time. So we'll see what happens here, but things do not look good. Tonight, the Dallas Stars and the Golden Knights both go back at it. Vegas plays Chicago, which should be a winnable game for them. But for Vegas to have any chance, Dallas has to lose their final two regular season games in regulation, and they have to win theirs in regulation. The Dallas Stars have one of the league's worst teams in the Arizona Coyotes tonight, and all they have to do is get at least 1 point. So as long as they don't lose in regulation and get it at least overtime, they will clinch their playoff spot, and Vegas will be out. So we will see where things go, but I would not be one bit surprised if things are settled this evening. But just for entertainment purposes alone, it would be intriguing to see a Vegas victory in regulation, a Dallas loss in regulation, to have it come down to the wire in the final game of the season, where it'd have to be again a Dallas loss and a Vegas win in both in regulation for things to change. Otherwise, the Stars would hang on to that spot. Vegas would next play St. Louis, which would be a fairly tough matchup, so they certainly have the odds stacked up against them. That much is for sure. So I don't think the odds of Vegas getting in at this point, they're pretty bleak, pretty slim, and likely not going to happen. Now, we also got an announcement today from the CHL, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, announcing today that they have decided that for the 2022 Import Draft, which is obviously where they teams are allowed to draft so many players from Europe and basically outside of North America, that they're basically banning Russian and Belarusian players from being included in that. As much as I know there's been all kinds of sanctions placed against Russia, which I fully support. I do not support their invasion of Ukraine. Very much against what they're doing over there. And I get all the things that are being done to punish them, so to speak. But to me, this is going a little bit too far. We're punishing a lot of players who have absolutely nothing to do with this. If anything, it's only going to benefit the KHL more. It's going to benefit Russia more. Then I don't think, and I'm not sure that they really realize that. I mean, it's tough enough getting some of these Russian prospects to come over and commit to coming to North America, as it was even before any of this have ever happened. Some prospects end up waiting quite some time. We're looking at 3, 4, 5 years in some cases. Look at Kirill Kaprizov, who took forever to come over to Minnesota. Ilya Sorokin in the Islanders organization. Even Igor Shesterkin in the Rangers took a long time as well. It's probably going to make that relationship that much worse. I mean, I even seen a scenario where Russian players they seem to be not really wanting to talk to Canadian media either. So the relationship is kind of going both sides here, and I don't entirely blame them based on how things are going. But this is something that I'm not really overly understanding or supportive of, but it is what it is. The CHL has made their decision, and in my opinion, it's only going to hurt them in the longer run and benefit Russia. But I don't think that's the intention, but that's what I see playing out. Now, as I mentioned, we have an article today from the Montreal Gazette and writer Stu Cowan analyzing the Montreal Canadiens, which I found quite interesting, taking a look at a lot of the things we could expect in the offseason, or at least based on his opinion on where things are at with this team. To kind of go through the Carey Price stuff, here's a quick update. We know that he was meeting with the doctor today in New York after practice, and we don't really know any more than that. We don't expect to get an update today on his situation. All we know is there was talk before that he could possibly play Friday, that he wasn't going to play in New York, but then he maybe playing Friday after that. At this point, he's considered day-to-day, but Stu Cowan in the article says that he feels his season is done. I've seen numerous other NHL reporters say that. And not only that, they feel his future is extremely uncertain. He's going to be 35 years old on August the 16th. He'll have 4 years left as he enters next year. 5 years if you count this year, but 4 years after this year left of the $10.5 million cap hit. Obviously, there's not a ton of cash left. A lot of the cash he does get is in the form of signing bonus. The actual salary isn't huge. And, obviously, depending on the reports that come back from the doctor, he may not be tradable. I mean, now, if he ends up a scenario where he can be an LTIR contract, that might be something that they could trade it, like what we're seeing with Shea Weber. That could be a possibility. So maybe he becomes tradable, just so teams could continue to exploit the LTIR pool. I know Montreal was looking to likely get out of using LTIR and get their salary down this offseason, certainly. So that's why there's a lot of talk that the Shea Weber contract could be moved, and we'll talk about him further here in a second. But essentially, the Carey Price, as a player, active player, would not be tradable. A buyout would not make any sense. So he's either going to remain with the Habs on injured reserve, or if he does get to the point that he can't play, which I guess it's a little bit early to say that's going to be the case, because we don't know. But if it were, maybe he becomes tradable, as like I said, like the Weber contract. But time will tell. But we don't know when we're going to see an update on that scenario and that situation. But I do know that it's probably going to come shortly after the season's over. At least that would be my gut instinct. But that's not confirmed at all. That's just my opinion. Obviously, when it comes to Carey Price, I know he's tried everything he can to play, and I don't think he'll continue if he doesn't feel like he can play up to his standards. And in the 4 games he did play in his return were not great. I didn't feel he was horrible by any means, but I don't think he was his old self either. And I don't know. I mean, for a knee with a torn meniscus to have that much trouble, to be out all season like that, is not the most common thing. So I kind of wonder myself if there might be more going on with the knee than we actually know. Of course, a few other players discussed in this article include Shea Weber, the current captain of the Montreal Canadiens, of course, who did not play this season. Apparently, Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes were very close to trading that contract before the NHL trade deadline. Other teams were interested. Mostly, I mean, there was some talk some teams might want it for LTIR purposes to kind of expand their cap, but it wasn't even so much that. Teams like Arizona were trying to get some of these contracts to help reach the cap floor. So that way it counts against their cap. They don't have to use the LTIR cap relief system that some teams are doing, and they can count it just as a regular contract and get them to the salary cap floor faster. If they had Price's contract too, that would be a combined over $18 million that they wouldn't have to have in other contracts. So we'll see what they decide to do. But I mean, the Weber was really close to being dealt, and it seems like they do want to get out of using LTIR, so it would not be shocking if he is dealt. Maybe he could be packaged up with something else. Maybe the return might not be a ton. I don't know. We'll see what happens in that regard, but given that he's not really an active player anymore, you have to think that it wouldn't be a significant return by any means. But when it comes to Shea Weber, I've seen a lot of people online on social media, mostly on Twitter, really ripping into Shea Weber and the fact that he hasn't been around the team this year, and the fact that he didn't show up for Guy Lafleur's tribute when he passed away, but he did go to Nashville for a ceremony earlier this year. So I'm like, to be honest, I don't think he really owes anybody anything. I don't think Shea Weber should be obligated to attend anything Montreal Canadiens. He's injured. Yes, he's the captain, but I don't think this is any kind of reflection on his leadership. If you look at the last game of the playoffs last year when they were beaten out, he was the first guy every player on that team went to because they felt terrible for him, and the fact that they likely knew his career was going to be over and that he wasn't going to get that Stanley Cup when they fell short. That team had nothing but respect for him, and we've never heard anything but good things about Shea Weber in the locker room and off the ice. So to me, I think people need to calm down with their hate on Weber for not being around much. It's not his fault that the Montreal Canadiens have not named a new captain yet. And I don't think that they should be pressured into rushing into that either. You have to have the right person. We've seen teams take their time with this. Some teams gone 2-3 years without a captain in some cases because they didn't know that they had the right player for that role, or that the player they thought might be ready wasn't quite ready for it yet. Like, they take their time with this and make sure they get it right so they're not changing it very often, because it's more of a prestigious thing. And I don't understand the hate, and I think people that are hating on him really need to get off their high horse and realize that he doesn't owe you anything. And I think you need to lay off of Shea Weber and kind of move on in that regard. I mean, at some point, I would suspect that his contract will be traded. They will name a new captain. I'm not sure when. I don't know how soon that's going to be. Probably not this year. Maybe. I really don't know what the organization plans are, but, in that regard, I would think that he's likely not going to be considered technically a Montreal Canadien for much longer, but he will be always a part of the alumni. Of course, Jeff Petrie is another guy that's expected to be dealt this year. He's got 3 years left at $6.25 million. There's still a lot of talk about the Dallas Stars, which was mentioned, obviously, if they lose John Klingberg, which is highly expected, that they might take Petrie, obviously. Even if Montreal could retain a little bit of salary, they get him, who can do a similar job. Maybe not quite as good as Klingberg, but still a right shot D who's got offensive instincts. Who, instead of giving a 7 or 8 year deal to Klingberg, they can have Petrie for 3 years at less money. That was rumored to be something they were interested in before, but of course hasn't happened yet. The Flyers, Red Wings were a couple other teams mentioned, but we don't know. It's still early to tell where things go on that front. Of course, Brendan Gallagher's referenced here too, as he played his will he have played his final game with the Habs when the season ends? We don't know. I mean, we talked before about the big rumor, which was actually something that was discussed in the same newspaper by the same author, Stu Cowan, about the connection to the Los Angeles Kings, wondering if Gallagher could end up there with Marc Bergevin there and Phil Deneau there now. Maybe that it's time for Gallagher to have a fresh start. Couple things for really to look at here with Gallagher. His production is nowhere near what he's making for money. So that's a concern for any team, including Montreal. Secondly, he probably would benefit from a fresh start. And given how competitive he is he really going to be able to withstand the pain that comes with going through a rebuild for a few years? I don't know. So he's certainly another guy that very much could be on the move. Jonathan Drouin is another player who I highly suspect they will do their best to find a fresh start for. I think it would benefit him greatly. I think the pressure dealing with the city and everything that comes with Montreal has certainly played a role in in everything for him on and off the ice, and I think it would be best for him to resume his hockey career somewhere else, to kind of have a fresh start and bouncing back. I mean, I don't know that he wants that. That's just my opinion. But he was mentioned in this article as another candidate who could get moved. But barring no moves, if you look at what they have on the books, you throw in like the extension for Nick Suzuki that kicks in this season. You got Price, Petrie, Suzuki, Gallagher, Drouin, and you throw in Josh Anderson. So you have like a core group of 6 players. It would incorporate over half the salary cap of $42.2 million. I mean, that is way too much on 6 players. We don't know what Price is going to play, of course. We don't know what his future holds. But if he were to be healthy, then that's a major, major problem. So if you move a couple of those contracts out, then that becomes a lot more manageable. So we know that there's going to be trades. There is no doubt. I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to be one of the busier teams this offseason. I do think that we're going to see them try to gain as many young players and picks for the upcoming draft, and then work on getting, hopefully, they probably would prefer to have the first pick in 2023 and have a shot at Connor Bedard would be my guess here, but I guess time will tell. But according to this article, which is what we've already kind of talked about before a little bit and thought all along, I think we're in line for some extremely significant changes in Montreal, some major turnover with some major veterans possibly leaving town. There will be a few left, but a lot of these guys do stand to possibly end up wearing different uniforms come next season. So let me know your thoughts, everything discussed here today, down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.